My name is June, a 34-year-old event venue owner from Boston with a complicated story to share. My younger sister Katie and I were inseparable growing up, which makes what happened all the more painful. For months, she gushed about her dream wedding venue, this gorgeous historic estate with sprawling gardens. Then came that text at 10:25 p.m. "Don't come to my wedding. You're no longer welcome." What Katie never realized, that dream venue she bragged about actually belonged to me. If you're watching this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I turned my sister's betrayal into the most unexpected wedding twist ever. Katie and I grew up in a modest suburban home outside Boston. With a 7-year age gap between us, I naturally fell into the protector role. I can still picture her trailing behind me everywhere in her little pink overalls, calling Junie, "Wait for me," in that high-pitched voice. Those were the sweet days before the tension in our home became unbearable. Our parents had what I would generously call a volatile relationship. Dad worked long hours at his accounting firm, and Mom managed a department store with an equally demanding schedule. The rare times they occupied the same space heated arguments followed. They tried counseling twice, but by the time I turned 16 and Katie was 9, they finally admitted defeat and filed for divorce. The separation hit Katie particularly hard. I remember holding her through countless nights of sobbing, promising that I would always be there no matter what. "We don't need anyone else," I would whisper, wiping her tears away. "We've got each other, and that's enough." In many ways, the divorce cemented our bond. We became each other's constant, the only reliable relationship in a world where even parents could stop loving each other. While our parents figured out their new separate lives, I stepped up as Katie's pseudo-parent. I helped with her homework, attended her school functions, and made sure she had someone cheering in the audience during her theater performances. When I left for college, I called her every single day without fail, even if just for 5 minutes between classes. After graduating with my business degree, I discovered a talent for spotting undervalued properties. What started as a modest job at a local real estate agency quickly evolved into my own investment company. By 28, I had purchased, renovated, and sold 6 commercial properties for substantial profits. I reinvested smartly and expanded into event venues, recognizing the consistent demand for beautiful spaces in our historic city. Katie took a different path, always the creative one. She pursued theater and visual arts, bouncing between passion projects that rarely paid well. I never minded supporting her financially through college and beyond. When she couldn't make rent, I covered it. When her car needed repairs, I handed her my credit card. It wasn't about keeping score. It was about being there for my sister who had endured so much. Her dating life followed a similar pattern of instability. She cycled through relationships with misunderstood artists who conveniently forgot their wallets at dinner or needed loans for their groundbreaking projects. Each breakup led her back to my spare bedroom, where I would comfort her with ice cream and reassurances that she deserved better. That's why Marcus initially seemed like a positive change. They met at a gallery opening where Katie was showcasing her photography. Tall, clean-cut, with an MBA and a job at a prestigious financial firm, Marcus appeared to offer the stability Katie had never prioritized before. Their romance moved rapidly, and within 8 months, Katie called me screaming about the princess-cut diamond on her finger. "June, I'm engaged. Can you believe it?" Marcus proposed last night at Le Cirque. Her voice bubbled with excitement during that call. "You have to help me plan everything. Nobody knows me like you do." I felt genuinely happy for her. Despite private concerns about the whirlwind timing, Katie deserved happiness. And if Marcus brought that into her life, I would support their relationship fully. When we met for celebration drinks the following weekend, I watched how her eyes lit up when she talked about him. That glow alone was enough to quiet my reservations. I already know exactly where I want to get married, she confided, over her third glass of champagne, Willow Creek Estate. You know that gorgeous historic property with the stone facade and the gardens? It's absolute perfection. I knew it well. The estate had been on the market for nearly a year, needing significant renovations and carrying a hefty price tag. Its previous owners had run it as a moderately successful event venue, but hadn't invested in proper upkeep. The property had tremendous potential under the right management. That night, after dropping Katie off at her apartment, I made a decision that would later prove fateful. I contacted the selling agent and arranged a private tour of Willow Creek the very next morning. By the end of the week, I had submitted an offer that was accepted almost immediately. The purchase aligned perfectly with my business goals, while also presenting an opportunity to give Katie the ultimate wedding gift, her dream venue, completely free of charge. I decided to keep my ownership secret temporarily. I wanted to surprise Katie at exactly the right moment, perhaps during her engagement party or when she began seriously venue hunting. In the meantime, I quietly started the renovation process, determined to transform Willow Creek into the magical setting my sister had always envisioned. The first subtle shift in Katie's behavior appeared about a month after her engagement. We had always shared everything from clothes to secrets, but suddenly she became oddly secretive about wedding preparations. When I offered suggestions for photographers or florists, I knew through my venue business she would smile politely and say, "That's sweet, but Marcus and I are going in a different direction." Then I met the Prestons. Marcus invited our whole family to Sunday brunch at his parents' sprawling home in Beacon Hill. Harold Preston, a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, and his wife Victoria, a board member for 3 major cultural institutions, exuded wealth and status from every perfectly tailored inch. Their home looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest, with original artwork and antiques that Katie later breathlessly informed me were museum-quality pieces. "Isn't this incredible?" Katie whispered as we toured their garden. "Can you believe I'm going to be part of this family?" The wonder in her voice carried an unmistakable undercurrent. This lifestyle represented everything she had never had. That day, I noticed Katie censoring herself, adopting a more refined laugh and repeatedly mentioning her gallery showings while omitting that they took place in coffee shops. She complimented Victoria's exquisite taste with such reverence that I barely recognized my outspoken sister who once mocked pretentiousness in others. The engagement party, 3 weeks later, took place at the Preston family's country club. I arrived in what I thought was a perfectly appropriate cocktail dress, only to realize I was dramatically underdressed among the designer gowns and custom suits. Katie, draped in a dress I knew she couldn't afford, barely had time to greet me before being whisked away by Victoria to meet very important friends of the family. Later that evening, I finally managed to steal a moment with my sister near the bar. "The party is lovely, Katie." "Are you having fun?" I asked, trying to reconnect with the sibling who suddenly felt like a stranger. "It's perfect," she gushed. "Victoria has such connections. She knows exactly how things should be done." When I mentioned a funny memory from our childhood, Katie glanced nervously around before responding in a lowered voice. "Let's not discuss family stories tonight, June. The Prestons are very private people. They value discretion." The message was clear. Our modest upbringing didn't fit the narrative she was creating. The first official bridesmaid meeting truly opened my eyes to how much had changed. Katie had selected 4 of Marcus's female relatives and 2 of her theater friends who coincidentally came from wealthy families. I arrived at the upscale restaurant in business casual attire, having come directly from inspecting renovation work at Willow Creek. Katie pulled me aside immediately, her smile tight. "Couldn't you have dressed up a little?" Everyone else made an effort. She gestured at my simple blouse and tailored pants, with barely concealed embarrassment. "I came from work, Katie. I mentioned that when you scheduled this during a workday," I reminded her. "Well, you should consider upgrading your wardrobe before the wedding," she replied. "The Prestons are very image-conscious, and the photographs will be published in Boston Society. Marcus's mother suggested Neiman's personal shopping service if you need guidance." The Katie I knew would have never commented on my appearance, or suggested I wasn't fashionable enough. This new Katie, desperate to impress her future in-laws, apparently would. Throughout the lunch, I noticed Katie deferring to Marcus's cousin Alessandra on every decision from color schemes to table settings. My suggestions were politely acknowledged, then swiftly overruled. When I proposed a touching tribute to our late grandmother during the ceremony, Katie exchanged glances with Alessandra before explaining that the wedding would follow traditional Preston family customs only. Despite these red flags, I made excuses for her behavior. Wedding planning is stressful. She's trying to navigate a new family dynamic. Once the wedding is over, my real sister will return. I clung to these rationalizations because the alternative was too painful to consider that Katie was willingly erasing our shared history to reinvent herself. 2 months before the wedding, Katie called me breathless with excitement. "June, you won't believe this. We got Willow Creek Estate. It just became available, and Marcus's father pulled some strings with his connections. Can you believe my luck? My absolute dream venue." I hesitated, momentarily confused by this version of events. Harold Preston hadn't pulled strings because no strings needed pulling. I owned the venue. But hearing Katie's genuine joy stopped me from revealing the truth just yet. She was happy. The wedding was progressing. Perhaps this wasn't the moment to complicate matters by explaining that her venue was already secured through my ownership. "That's fantastic, Katie," I responded. "I know how much you wanted that location. The best part is that they're renovating it right now," she continued, oblivious to my knowledge. "By the time our wedding happens, it will be absolutely perfect. Victoria is working with their design team to ensure everything meets our standards." I bit my tongue, choosing not to mention that I was personally overseeing those renovations, incorporating elements I knew Katie would love based on magazine clippings she had shared with me years ago. I had commissioned custom stained glass windows for the reception hall, restored the original hardwood floors, and redesigned the gardens with her favorite flowers. "I can't wait to see it," I said truthfully. I couldn't wait for her to see what I had created specifically with her happiness in mind. "You'll have to wait until the wedding, like everyone else," Katie replied, with an unusual edge to her voice. "Victoria thinks keeping the transformed venue a surprise adds an element of drama that guests will appreciate." I swallowed my hurt and disappointment. Apparently, I was now categorized as just another guest, rather than the sister who had been Katie's confidant and supporter throughout her entire life. Still, I decided to keep my ownership of Willow Creek secret a little longer. In my heart, I believed that once wedding stress subsided, my real sister would return, and we would laugh about this strange period in our relationship. As the wedding date approached, Katie's demands increased proportionally to my growing disillusionment. What began as occasional dismissiveness evolved into regular thoughtlessness and finally crossed into deliberate exclusion. 3 months before the wedding, Katie requested a private meeting at her favorite cafe. I arrived expecting some sister bonding time, perhaps a return to our old comfortable relationship. Instead, I found her armed with a spreadsheet and a determined expression. So we need to discuss your financial contribution to the wedding, she stated, without preamble sliding a detailed budget across the table. The total at the bottom exceeded $200,000, an astronomical sum that reflected the Prestons' influence rather than Katie's original vision. More shocking than the amount was the highlighted row labeled June's portion with a figure of $50,000 beside it. Katie, this is substantial, I said carefully, studying her expression. When did we discuss me contributing this amount? She sighed as if I was being deliberately difficult. June, you're my sister, and the most financially stable person in our family. Dad can barely afford his suit, and Mom's contribution is handling some of the DIY elements that Victoria is allowing. The Prestons are covering most costs, but they expect family to contribute meaningfully. I took a deep breath. I'm already contributing meaningfully by getting the venue ready, I started to say, before catching myself. I mean, I'd be happy to help, but $50,000 is beyond what I can offer right now. This was not technically true. I could afford it, but something about being handed an invoice for my sisterly duties felt deeply wrong. Still, I didn't want to create additional conflict. What if I cover the catering costs, I suggested. That would be around $20,000 based on your spreadsheet. Katie's lips thinned with disappointment. I suppose that would work, though Alessandra's sister received full funding for her wedding from her siblings. The comparison hung in the air like a judgment. I agreed to the catering expenses, while secretly continuing to invest in Willow Creek improvements. If Katie wouldn't allow me to participate in her wedding planning officially, I would ensure the venue itself exceeded all expectations. New lighting systems, a state-of-the-art sound setup, and handcrafted wooden benches for the garden ceremony area all represented my unacknowledged gift to my sister. 2 months before the wedding, Katie organized a bridesmaids shopping expedition to find complimentary dresses that would photograph well together. As the maid of honor, I assumed I would help coordinate this important event. Instead, I received a text the evening before. Meeting at Eliza's boutique at 10 a.m. tomorrow for dress selection. Alessandra has already chosen the color palette. Please be punctual. When I arrived exactly on time the next morning, the other bridesmaids were already clustered around a collection of sample dresses in varying shades of silver and pale blue. Katie barely acknowledged my entrance before returning to an animated conversation with Marcus's sisters about their recent vacation in the Maldives. I think we should consider June's coloring when selecting the final palette, one of the theater friends ventured, gesturing toward me. These cooler tones might wash her out. Katie glanced at me critically. June can make anything work with the right makeup. The Preston family photos have a very specific aesthetic, and Victoria has her heart set on these colors. Throughout the appointment, my opinions were solicited last, if at all. When I emerged from the dressing room in a silver gown that the boutique owner admitted was challenging for your skin tone, Katie and Alessandra exchanged glances before Katie announced that this would be perfect for maintaining visual harmony. The final insult came when I overheard Katie responding to a question about her family. "Oh, it's just our parents. And my sister June," she said to Marcus's aunt. "June's in real estate or something. She's between relationships right now, so we're seating her with my theater friends rather than at the family table." "That's thoughtful," the aunt replied. "Single women at weddings can be such a depressing reminder of what's missing in their lives." Katie nodded sympathetically, apparently forgetting the countless times I had told her I was content with my single status and focused on building my business. When I confronted her later about this conversation, Katie dismissed my concerns. "You're being too sensitive, June. I was just trying to make conversation." By making me sound like a lonely spinster, Katie, You know my business is much more than real estate or something. I own multiple properties and venues. And I've chosen to focus on my career rather than dating. That doesn't make me pitiable. Katie rolled her eyes. Not everyone wants to hear about your business success, June. It can come across as bragging, especially around people like the Prestons who operate at a completely different level. I'm just trying to help you fit in without making others uncomfortable. The message was crystal clear. My actual life accomplishments and choices were inconvenient to the narrative Katie wanted to present to her new family. Rather than being proud of my success, she saw it as something to downplay and minimize. The final breaking point came during a chance encounter with Victoria Preston at a charity luncheon I attended for business networking purposes. She approached me with the confident smile of someone who has never been denied anything. June, how lovely to see you. Katie tells me you've been so helpful with some of the smaller wedding details. Smaller details, like contributing $20,000 and secretly renovating the entire venue. I try to support my sister, however I can, I replied diplomatically. Your little real estate venture must keep you busy, she continued her tone, suggesting she was discussing a charming hobby rather than my multi-million-dollar company. It does, I answered, choosing simplicity over correction. Katie mentioned you might help with some of the guest transportation arrangements. We have several international attendees who'll need assistance from the airport. This was the first I'd heard of such a request, but it aligned perfectly with how Katie had been treating me as free labor rather than an honored participant in her special day. I'll have to check my schedule, I said noncommittally. My business requires considerable attention, especially with a new property acquisition underway. I didn't mention that the new acquisition was actually the final phase of renovations at Willow Creek, specifically designed to create Katie's perfect wedding backdrop. Victoria's smile remained fixed, but her eyes cooled. Family priorities are so important, don't you think? The Prestons have always believed that nothing comes before family obligations. The implication was unmistakable. In the Preston worldview, my sister's wedding should supersede any business commitments. What Victoria didn't understand, and what Katie seemed to have forgotten, was that I had spent my entire life putting my sister's needs first. This wedding was simply the first time I'd chosen to maintain some boundaries around my participation. Despite these increasing tensions, I continued pouring resources into Willow Creek. The gardens were now blooming with Katie's favorite peonies and hydrangeas. The bridal suite had been completely redesigned with her aesthetic in mind. The caterer's kitchen had been upgraded with top-of-the-line equipment to ensure perfect execution of the menu. I held on to hope that once Katie saw the venue on her wedding day complete with all the thoughtful touches I had incorporated just for her, she would remember our bond. Perhaps then she would recognize that through all her life transitions, I had remained her most loyal supporter, even when that support went unacknowledged. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled at the Prestons' Country Club on a perfect early summer evening. The sun cast a golden glow across the immaculate grounds as staff in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I arrived 15 minutes early, as was my habit for important events, wearing a deep burgundy dress that had required a significant portion of my monthly budget. The maitre d' escorted me to the private dining room where Harold and Victoria Preston were already holding court, surrounded by family members who shared their patrician features and confident bearing. Katie stood beside Marcus, radiant in a white cocktail dress, her hand tucked possessively into the crook of his arm. For a moment, seeing her genuine happiness, I felt a surge of warmth. Despite our recent tensions, my sister was glowing with joy on the eve of her wedding. That warmth cooled considerably when Katie spotted me, leaned to whisper something to Marcus, then approached with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "June, you're early," she said, as if this were a criticism rather than evidence of my respect for the occasion. "The florist delivered the wrong centerpieces for tomorrow. Since you're here, would you mind calling them to sort it out? Victoria is extremely particular about having peonies, not garden roses." No greeting, no hug, just another task assignment. "Hello to you too, Katie," I replied, making one last attempt at normal sisterly interaction. "You look beautiful. Are you excited about tomorrow?" "Of course I am," she responded, glancing back at the Prestons. "But I'm also stressed about a million details. So the florist—" I nodded and stepped aside to make the call, though it wasn't my responsibility. 20 minutes and considerable negotiation later, I had secured the correct flowers for delivery first thing in the morning. When I returned to the party, I found that seating had commenced without me. Katie was already positioned between Marcus and his father, with Victoria on Harold's other side. The place card with my name sat at the far end of the table beside a great aunt I had never met, and one of Marcus's teenage cousins. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was an afterthought, not an honored member of the bride's family. Throughout dinner, conversation flowed around rather than including me. When I attempted to join discussions about the wedding plans, Katie would quickly redirect or speak over me. After the main course was cleared, Harold Preston stood to make a toast, speaking eloquently about welcoming Katie into their family and the bright future ahead for the young couple. Then Katie rose for what was ostensibly the maid of honor speech. My heart lifted briefly, expecting some acknowledgement of our shared history and bond. Instead, she directed her attention entirely toward the Preston family. "I want to thank Victoria, especially, for guiding me through every aspect of wedding planning." Katie began raising her glass toward her future mother-in-law. "Your impeccable taste and connections have made everything possible, especially securing our dream venue at Willow Creek Estate." My stomach clenched at this blatant misattribution. Victoria had secured nothing. The venue was available because I owned it, and had specifically held the date for Katie's wedding. Katie continued, "And Alessandra has been absolutely essential as my wedding coordinator. I couldn't have managed without her expert advice on everything from the invitations to the menu. These were all responsibilities traditionally belonging to the maid of honor roles I had been systematically prevented from fulfilling, despite my willingness and expertise in event planning. Tomorrow will be perfect because of the incredible Preston family welcome I've received," Katie concluded, without a single mention of her own family or my contributions. The applause that followed felt like tiny daggers. I sat frozen in disbelief, wondering if anyone else noticed the complete erasure of our family from Katie's narrative. When the toasts concluded, I gathered my courage and gently tapped my glass with a spoon standing to offer my own brief remarks. "I'd also like to say a few words," I began, my voice shakier than I would have liked. "As Katie's sister and maid of honor—" Actually, Katie interrupted, her voice carrying clearly across the table. "I have a small announcement about that." All eyes turned to her as she continued with a practiced laugh. "June has been so busy with her work commitments that she hasn't been able to fulfill many of the traditional maid of honor duties. So Marcus and I have decided to make a slight adjustment to the wedding party." The silence in the room was absolute as Katie delivered the final blow. "Alessandra will be stepping into the maid of honor role for the ceremony and reception. June will of course still be recognized as my sister in the family seating arrangement." The room erupted in murmured conversations and uncomfortable glances. Victoria Preston nodded approvingly while Harold raised his glass, as if this announcement deserved celebration. Marcus squeezed Katie's shoulder supportively, completely aligned with her decision to humiliate me publicly. My face burned with embarrassment and shock. Without conscious thought, I placed my napkin beside my half-eaten dessert, gathered my clutch, and walked out of the dining room with as much dignity as I could muster. No one, not even Katie, called after me or attempted to stop my departure. In the parking lot, I sat in my car, hands trembling too violently to insert the key into the ignition. Tears blurred my vision as the reality of what had just happened sank in. My sister, the person I had supported and protected since childhood, had just discarded me in front of both of our families. Years of emotional and financial support, countless hours listening to her dreams and nursing her through disappointments, all erased in a moment of social climbing opportunism. When I finally managed to drive home, I replayed our relationship in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed. Had Katie always viewed me as merely useful rather than beloved? Had I been nothing more than a convenient support system to be discarded when a more advantageous connection appeared? The thought was almost too painful to bear. I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to decide how to proceed. Should I still attend the wedding, sitting quietly in family seating, while Alessandra fulfilled the role that should have been mine? The humiliation would be excruciating, but perhaps I owed it to our shared history to be present for Katie's important day. Before I could reach a decision, my phone chimed with a text message. The timestamp read 10:25 p.m. Don't come to my wedding. You're no longer welcome. The Prestons think you'll ruin the aesthetic of the photos, and your attitude has been uncooperative throughout the planning. It's better for everyone if you just stay away. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend the casual cruelty of the message. My hands shook so violently that I almost dropped the phone as I attempted to call Katie. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. Another text arrived. I've made my decision. Please respect it and don't create a scene. The Prestons are important to my future, and I need tomorrow to be perfect. In that moment, something inside me broke and reformed. The pain transformed into a cold clarity. For the first time, I saw Katie not as my vulnerable little sister, but as an adult making calculated choices. Choices that explicitly excluded me from her life. And then I remembered Willow Creek Estate. The venue Katie had been bragging about for months. The venue Victoria Preston had supposedly secured through her connections. The venue that currently had my name on the deed and my renovation team scheduled to complete final touches at dawn. The venue that with a single phone call could become completely unavailable for tomorrow's wedding. I didn't make that call immediately. Despite the searing pain of betrayal, impulsiveness had never been my nature. Instead, I poured another glass of wine and opened my laptop to review the Willow Creek ownership documents and contracts. The property was undeniably mine, purchased legitimately through my company. No formal agreement had ever been signed with Katie or the Prestons regarding the wedding, as I had planned to offer the venue as a gift. At midnight, I called my business attorney Robert, apologizing for the late hour. June, this better be important, he grumbled, voice thick with interrupted sleep. It is. I need to understand my legal rights regarding a last-minute cancellation at Willow Creek, I explained, outlining the situation as concisely as possible. Let me get this straight, Robert said, after listening patiently. You own the venue. There's no signed contract with any party regarding tomorrow's event. No deposits have been paid to you or your company. Correct. Then legally, you have no obligation to host this wedding. The venue is your private property, and you can determine its use at your discretion. His confirmation unleashed a flood of possibilities. I could simply close the venue. One call to my property manager would ensure the gates remained locked. The staff informed that the event was canceled. The image of Katie arriving in her wedding gown to find the venue inaccessible brought a momentary flash of satisfaction that quickly dissolved into discomfort. Was revenge what I truly wanted? The question echoed as I thanked Robert and ended the call. I spent the next hour pacing my apartment, wrestling with competing emotions. The hurt part of me wanted Katie to experience even a fraction of the pain and humiliation she had caused me. The loving part remembered holding her through thunderstorms and cheering at her high school graduation. Could I really ruin what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life? At 2 in the morning, I drove to Willow Creek Estate. The security guard recognized me immediately and unlocked the gate. Inside, the transformation was nearly complete. The gardens glowed with subtle lighting that would illuminate tomorrow's evening ceremony. The reception hall gleamed with polished floors and crystal chandeliers I had personally selected to match Katie's Pinterest boards. I ran my hand along the custom wooden arch where she would speak her vows, remembering how she had once described her dream wedding setup during a late-night conversation years ago. Every element of this venue contained my love for my sister expressed in physical form. The realization brought fresh tears. As dawn approached, I made several calls to key staff members who had been working on the Willow Creek renovations. Maria, my events coordinator, answered, despite the early hour. "June, is everything okay?" Concern filled her voice. "I need to ask you something, and I want complete honesty," I replied. "In your interactions with my sister regarding the wedding preparations, how has she explained the venue situation?" Maria hesitated before answering carefully. She told all vendors that her future father-in-law secured the venue through his connections. When I mentioned that you were the owner, she asked me to maintain that narrative as a fun surprise for after the wedding. "And how has she been treating the staff?" My stomach tightened, already anticipating the answer. "Professional, but demanding. She's made several last-minute changes and expressed disappointment that certain requests weren't possible with the current layout." When Jake explained that the sound system was already top of the line because you had personally upgraded it for her, she seemed uncomfortable with the information and changed the subject. Jake, my audio-visual specialist, had apparently been more direct than I would have advised about my involvement. Still, Katie's reaction spoke volumes about her determination to minimize my contributions. "Has she acknowledged any of the custom elements I incorporated specifically for her?" I asked, thinking of the stained glass windows and garden plantings. "Not directly. She's told everyone that her future mother-in-law helped design the space. When the landscaper mentioned that the garden layout was based on your specifications, she said something about you making suggestions that Victoria refined." This final confirmation settled something inside me. Katie wasn't just excluding me from her special day. She was actively erasing my role in creating it, taking credit for my financial investment and thoughtful planning, while simultaneously deciding I wasn't worthy to attend. I thanked Maria and made one more call to Jake, confirming what I had suspected. Katie had told everyone that the Prestons had arranged and financed everything related to the venue. My contributions, both monetary and personal, had been completely attributed to others. By sunrise, I had formulated a plan that felt appropriate to the situation. Not revenge exactly, but a necessary reclaiming of respect. I would not cancel the wedding outright, which would indeed be vindictive. Instead, I would clarify ownership and establish conditions that acknowledged the truth of the situation. I drafted a carefully worded email to Katie attaching scanned copies of the Willow Creek deed and renovation contracts. The message was simple but firm. "Katie, I'm deeply hurt by your decision to exclude me from your wedding, especially after the text message stating I'm no longer welcome. As you'll see from the attached documentation, I am the legal owner of Willow Creek Estate. I purchased it last year specifically to surprise you with your dream venue as a wedding gift. The renovations you've been admiring were designed and financed entirely by me based on preferences you've shared over the years. Given the current circumstances, Willow Creek Estate is unavailable for your wedding tomorrow unless the following conditions are met. 1. A public acknowledgement to both families regarding the true ownership of the venue and my contributions to creating your dream wedding location. 2. A sincere apology for the hurtful exclusion and public humiliation at the rehearsal dinner. 3. Respectful treatment moving forward, regardless of your relationship with the Preston family. I have never asked for gratitude for supporting you, Katie, but I do expect basic respect as your sister and as a human being. The choice is yours. I will be available by phone until noon today to discuss this matter. I hesitated before pressing send, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Then I remembered the coldness in Katie's text. Don't come to my wedding. You're no longer welcome. With renewed resolve, I sent the email, then turned off my phone and tried to get some sleep. When I awoke 3 hours later and turned my phone back on, it immediately began buzzing with notifications. 15 missed calls from Katie. 23 text messages ranging from outraged, "How dare you?" "Threaten my wedding," to desperate, "Please call me now." 5 voicemails that I couldn't bring myself to listen to yet. 3 missed calls from my mother, and surprisingly 1 from Harold Preston himself. I ignored them all and made coffee, needing clarity, before engaging with the situation. As I sat at my kitchen table considering my next steps, an insistent knocking started at my front door. When it didn't cease, after several minutes, I reluctantly answered. Katie stood in the hallway still wearing pajamas, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. Behind her, Marcus waited with an expression hovering between anger and concern. "How could you?" Katie burst out the moment I opened the door. "You know how important this wedding is to me. To threaten everything the day before is cruel even for you." "Even for me," I repeated, genuinely confused by the characterization. "When have I ever been cruel to you, Katie?" She pushed past me into the apartment, Marcus following hesitantly. "You've always been jealous of my relationship with Marcus. You can't stand that I'm finally having something beautiful that doesn't involve you controlling everything." The accusation was so backward that I actually laughed, which only inflamed Katie further. "This isn't funny. You purchased my venue behind my back, and now you're holding my wedding hostage because your feelings got hurt." I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. "I bought Willow Creek a year ago as an investment property and planned to give you the venue as a wedding gift. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars renovating it specifically to match your dream wedding vision. If it was a gift, then you can't take it back," Katie countered. "I never officially gave it," I pointed out calmly. "And gifts generally don't come with the giver being explicitly uninvited from the celebration." Marcus stepped forward, adopting what I assumed was his professional negotiation stance. "June, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Katie was upset after the rehearsal dinner and sent that text in the heat of the moment. Of course you're welcome at our wedding." "A misunderstanding," I echoed. "Was it also a misunderstanding when Katie announced in front of everyone that I was being replaced as maid of honor? Or when she consistently attributed all my contributions to your parents?" Marcus at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Those decisions were based on practical considerations. My mother has very specific ideas about how Preston family weddings should proceed. And those ideas don't include acknowledging the bride's actual family or giving credit where it's due. Before Marcus could respond, my phone rang. The screen displayed Harold Preston. With a pointed look at both of them, I answered on speaker. "This is June. June Harold Preston here." His voice carried the confident authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "I understand there's some confusion regarding the Willow Creek property. I've taken the liberty of having my legal team review the situation, and they've advised me that your 11th hour withdrawal constitutes tortious interference. We're prepared to file for an emergency injunction this morning unless you reconsider your position." I felt a calm certainty settle over me. "Mr. Preston, there's no contract to interfere with. I own the property outright, and no formal agreement was ever established regarding its use tomorrow. My attorney confirmed this last night. But I'd be happy to meet with you to discuss potential resolutions." A brief silence followed. "My office, 1 hour," he finally said before disconnecting. Katie stared at me, a mixture of fury and fear on her face. "You have to fix this, June. 200 guests are arriving tomorrow. Everything is arranged." "I'm going to meet with your future father-in-law as requested," I replied evenly. "What happens next depends on whether my conditions are met." Marcus led a still protesting Katie out of my apartment while I dressed for the confrontation ahead. I selected my most professional attire, gathered all relevant documentation, and headed to the Preston Law Firm in downtown Boston. Harold's corner office offered a panoramic view of the city and was clearly designed to intimidate visitors. Victoria was already seated beside his massive desk, her expression glacial. To my surprise, my mother was also present, looking confused and out of place in this rarefied environment. "June, please explain to me what's happening," Mom said, as soon as I entered. "Katie called me hysterical about you ruining her wedding." Before I could respond, Harold interjected. "Let's focus on resolving this situation efficiently. June, I have the documentation ready for you to sign, acknowledging that while you may technically own the property, you granted verbal permission for its use tomorrow, which constitutes a binding agreement in the state of Massachusetts." I placed my own folder on his desk. "Actually, Mr. Preston, I've brought the complete history of the Willow Creek acquisition and renovation, including dated plans that clearly show I've been preparing the venue specifically for Katie's wedding for months. I also have statements from contractors confirming that all design decisions and payments came directly from me, not from you or Victoria, as Katie has apparently claimed." Victoria's perfect composure faltered slightly. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I purchased Willow Creek as both a business investment and a gift for my sister. I've invested over $400,000 in renovations tailored to Katie's preferences, yet somehow the narrative became that you secured the venue through your connections and oversaw its preparation." My mother gasped. "You bought Willow Creek, June. That's a multi-million-dollar property." I nodded. "My company has been quite successful, Mom. Something Katie consistently downplays to the Prestons." Harold leaned forward, reassessing me with newfound interest. "Your company. I was under the impression you worked for a local real estate agency." "I own Acorn Properties. We specialize in historical renovations and luxury event spaces. Willow Creek is our 6th major acquisition." The shift in the room was palpable. Where the Prestons had viewed me as an inconvenient obstacle moments before, they now saw a potentially valuable business connection. Victoria recovered first, her smile tight but present. "There seems to have been a significant miscommunication. Perhaps if we all sit down with Katie and clarify these matters." "That would be an excellent first step," I agreed. "Along with addressing the other conditions I outlined in my email." Over the next 2 hours, we negotiated terms that would allow the wedding to proceed. Katie and Marcus were summoned, and for the first time, Katie heard the full extent of my involvement in creating her dream wedding venue. Her expression cycled through disbelief, shame, and eventually something approaching genuine remorse. "I had no idea," she whispered. "You never said anything about buying Willow Creek." "It was meant to be a surprise," I explained. "A meaningful gift from the sister who has always supported your dreams. And instead, I excluded you from the most important day of my life." Tears filled her eyes, but I wasn't ready to absolve her so easily. "You didn't just exclude me, Katie. You replaced me, humiliated me publicly, and then explicitly uninvited me via text. After I had contributed not only the venue, but also paid for the catering." Harold's eyebrows rose at this additional financial information. I could almost see him recalculating my net worth in his mind. "The wedding can proceed at Willow Creek," I stated firmly, "under the following conditions. First, I will be reinstated as maid of honor if I choose to accept the role. Second, there will be a public acknowledgement at the reception regarding the true ownership of the venue and my contribution. Third, moving forward, my role in Katie's life and my professional accomplishments will be accurately represented, not minimized to fit a more convenient narrative." Victoria looked like she had bitten into something sour, but nodded in agreement. Harold, ever the pragmatist, extended his hand. "Your terms are acceptable, and perhaps we might discuss potential business opportunities at a more appropriate time." My mother, who had watched this entire negotiation with wide eyes, finally found her voice. "I'm so proud of you, June. Not just for your success, but for standing up for yourself while still finding a compassionate solution." Katie approached me hesitantly. "I'm so sorry, June. I got caught up in everything the Prestons represented. Comfort, stability, status, all the things we never had growing up. I thought I needed to become someone new to deserve it all." "You never needed to erase who you are or where you came from," I told her softly. "And you certainly never needed to erase me from your life to move forward in it." She nodded tearfully. "Will you still come tomorrow?" "Still be my maid of honor. I understand if you don't want to." I considered the question seriously. The hurt was still raw, but beneath it lay decades of sisterly love that couldn't be erased by a few months of poor behavior. "I'll be there, I promised. Not because you deserve it right now, but because that's what sisters do. They show up for each other, even when it's difficult." As we left Harold's office together, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The venue would no longer vanish overnight, but something else had materialized in its place. Newfound respect from the Prestons, a renewed appreciation from Katie, and most importantly, my own unshakable sense of self-worth. The wedding proceeded the following day at Willow Creek Estate. The gardens bloomed exactly as I had planned, the lighting captured the golden hour perfectly, and the reception hall gleamed with all the custom touches I had incorporated with Katie in mind. I stood beside my sister as her maid of honor, watching her exchange vows with Marcus beneath the wooden arch I had commissioned. When she turned to hand me her bouquet, our eyes met with a new understanding that transcended the day's scripted moments. During the reception, Harold Preston surprisingly honored our agreement without prompting. He tapped his glass for attention before dinner was served and addressed the assembled guests. "We're gathered in this beautiful venue thanks to the generosity and vision of the bride's sister, June. What many of you may not know is that June is the owner of Willow Creek Estate and has personally overseen its transformation into the stunning space we're enjoying today. The Preston family would like to acknowledge her remarkable contribution to making this day special." The applause that followed felt like a balm on my previously wounded spirit. Katie squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, Thank you for not giving up on me. In my own toast later that evening, I spoke from the heart about our childhood bond, carefully avoiding any mention of recent tensions. Katie has always chased her dreams with passion, I concluded. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter, but some things remain constant. My love for you and my belief in your happiness. To Katie and Marcus. The dynamic between Katie and the Prestons shifted subtly but significantly after the truth about my financial standing emerged. Where Victoria had previously treated me with barely concealed condescension, she now made efforts to highlight my business acumen to her friends. Harold approached me at the end of the reception with a business card and an invitation to discuss potential joint ventures. More meaningful was the change in Katie's behavior. The artificial polish she had adopted to impress the Prestons gradually fell away in the months following the wedding. During their Christmas gathering, I overheard her proudly telling Marcus's relatives about our childhood adventures, rather than trying to fabricate a more sophisticated history. My relationship with Katie required careful rebuilding. The betrayal had exposed fault lines in our bond that couldn't be repaired overnight. For the first time in our lives, I established clear boundaries. I no longer offered financial assistance automatically, instead waiting for direct requests that I evaluated based on genuine need, rather than emotional manipulation. We scheduled regular sister lunches where phones were put away, allowing for real conversation without Preston family interruptions. 6 months after the wedding, Katie called me in tears. Marcus's mother is driving me crazy with her expectations. She wants us to join the country club even though we can't afford the fees, and she keeps making these little comments about my clothes and our apartment. In the past, I might have immediately offered to cover the country club fees, or suggested she move into one of my properties. Instead, I listened without solving her problem. That sounds really difficult, I said. What do you think you should do? I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to please her, but I'm exhausted trying to be someone I'm not. You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Katie. That's always been enough. She was quiet for a moment. It wasn't enough for me, though, was it? I tried to erase our whole history to fit into their world. I'm so ashamed of how I treated you. We can't change the past, I told her gently, but we can decide what happens moving forward. That conversation marked a turning point in Katie's journey. She began setting her own boundaries with the Prestons, declining events that made her uncomfortable and speaking more honestly about her background and values. To my surprise, Marcus supported these changes, admitting that he too found his parents' social expectations exhausting. For my part, the experience transformed how I approached all relationships. I recognized patterns of people-pleasing and financial overgeneration that had defined not just my relationship with Katie, but many of my interactions. I learned to value my contributions, to expect basic respect as a minimum requirement, and to walk away when that respect wasn't forthcoming. 1 year after the wedding, Katie and I met at Willow Creek, which had become one of Boston's most sought-after event venues. We walked through the gardens where she had spoken her vows, now enhanced with additional plantings and sculpture installations. I think about that text message every day, Katie said, as we sat on a bench overlooking the pond. How close I came to destroying our relationship forever, over what impressing people whose approval was never going to fulfill me anyway. We all make mistakes, I replied, especially when we're afraid. What was I afraid of, she wondered. Maybe that you weren't enough as yourself, that you needed to become someone else to deserve happiness. She nodded slowly. I think I was afraid of where I came from, of not measuring up. The Prestons made me feel like our background was something to overcome rather than part of what made me who I am. And now, A genuine smile spread across her face. Now I know that the only approval I need is my own, and maybe yours sometimes. We've rebuilt something different from our former relationship. No longer is it defined by my caretaking and Katie's dependence. Instead, we've created a more balanced connection based on mutual respect and honesty. Katie has started her own photography business with a small loan that she insists on repaying with interest. I've learned to share my vulnerabilities rather than always playing the strong, supportive role. The most important lesson I learned through this experience was about the difference between loving someone and respecting myself. For years, I had conflated the two, believing that unlimited giving was the purest expression of love. What I now understand is that true love exists within boundaries. It requires reciprocity and respect to flourish. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do both for ourselves and others is to stand firm in our truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. So if you're watching this and recognizing patterns from your own family dynamics, ask yourself, are you setting healthy boundaries? Are you honoring your own worthwhile, still maintaining connection? The answers might not be simple, but they're worth exploring. And remember, sometimes the most powerful string you can pull isn't revenge or control, but the quiet dignity of knowing your own value and requiring others to acknowledge it too. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who was taking you for granted? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more reflections on family relationships and personal growth. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself.